The morning sun filtered through the crystalline towers of the celestial embassy, casting rainbow patterns across the polished marble floors. Nadia Winters knelt beside her cleaning cart, scrubbing at a stubborn stain that marred the pristine surface. Her knees ached from hours of work, but she kept her focus on the task at hand. In this building where diplomats from across the galaxy negotiated treaties and alliances, she was invisible. Just another human worker maintaining the gleaming facade of intergalactic cooperation. The Draconith had arrived on Earth 7 years ago, their massive starships descending through the clouds like ancient gods returning to reclaim their domain. They were magnificent creatures, standing 3 times the height of an average human, with scales that shifted between emerald and sapphire depending on the light. Their wings, when unfurled, could span the width of a city street. Unlike the invasion scenarios humanity had imagined for centuries, the Draconith came in peace. They represented the Galactic Assembly, a coalition of 43 sentient species that had been observing Earth's development for millennia. Humanity was finally ready to join the cosmic community, or so they said. Nadia had been working at the embassy for 3 years. The pay was better than anything she could find elsewhere, and she needed every credit. Her younger brother, Timothy, was studying engineering at the university, and their parents had passed away in a transport accident 5 years ago. Nadia had dropped out of her own studies to support him, taking whatever work she could find. The embassy job had seemed like a blessing at the time. Now, as she scrubbed floors and emptied waste receptacles, she sometimes wondered if she had made the right choice. The Draconith staff barely acknowledged her existence. To them, she was simply part of the infrastructure, no more worthy of notice than the automated cleaning drones that patrolled the lower levels. She had learned to accept this. It was easier to remain invisible than to draw attention. In her experience, attention from powerful beings rarely led to anything good. As she worked, Nadia listened to the soft hum of conversation echoing from the upper galleries. A delegation of Draconith nobles had arrived the previous evening for some important conference. The entire building buzzed with heightened security and nervous energy. Additional guards had been posted at every entrance, their armor gleaming like polished obsidian. Even the human staff had been briefed about maintaining extra discretion during the visit. Nadia finished with the floor and began pushing her cart toward the service corridor. The embassy was designed with 2 parallel circulation systems. The grand halls and conference chambers for the important visitors, and the narrow service passages for the workers who kept everything functioning. She preferred the service corridors. They were quiet, and she could work without feeling the weight of dismissive stares. She was halfway down the corridor when she heard it. A sound so faint she almost missed it beneath the mechanical whir of the ventilation system. A soft chirping, like a bird caught in distress. Nadia paused, tilting her head to listen. There it was again, coming from somewhere above her. She looked up at the ventilation grate in the ceiling. The chirping grew more insistent, more desperate. Without thinking, Nadia grabbed the maintenance ladder from her cart and positioned it beneath the grate. The screws came loose easily, and she carefully removed the cover. The chirping stopped. For a moment, there was only silence and the gentle rush of recycled air. Then she saw them, 2 luminous eyes staring at her from the darkness of the duct. Nadia's breath caught. She had seen Draconith before, of course, but never this close and never one so small. The creature huddled in the ventilation shaft was no larger than a cat, its scales gleaming like polished amethyst. Tiny wings, almost translucent, pressed against its sides. It chirped again, a sound filled with fear and exhaustion. Every instinct told Nadia to report this immediately. Call security. Let the professionals handle it. But the creature looked at her with such intelligence, such desperate hope, that she found herself reaching into the shaft instead. Her fingers closed around something warm and surprisingly soft. The hatchling did not resist as she carefully pulled it free. In the artificial light of the corridor, the creature was breathtaking. Its scales shimmered with inner light, creating patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid starlight. The hatchling made a soft trilling sound and pressed against her chest, seeking warmth. Nadia felt something unexpected stir in her heart. This was not just an animal. The intelligence in those eyes was unmistakable. This was a child, lost and frightened. She knew the protocols. Draconith hatchlings were sacred, each one representing the future of their species. They laid eggs rarely, sometimes going decades between successful hatchings. This little one must be incredibly important to someone. She needed to get it to security immediately. Nadia carefully tucked the hatchling inside her jacket, leaving the zipper partly open so it could breathe. The creature settled against her immediately, its tiny heartbeat fluttering against her ribs. She descended the ladder and began making her way toward the main security station on the ground level. The hatchling was warm, almost hot to the touch. She could feel it gradually relaxing as it absorbed her body heat. The service elevator seemed to take forever. Nadia kept checking on the hatchling, making sure it was comfortable. The little creature had closed its eyes, apparently deciding that she was safe. One small claw rested against her collarbone, and she could feel the whisper of its breath against her skin. Despite the strangeness of the situation, Nadia found herself smiling. There was something profoundly trusting about the way the hatchling had surrendered to her care. The elevator doors opened onto the grand entrance hall. It was late evening, and most of the embassy staff had departed for the day. Only a single Draconith guard sat at the security desk, his attention focused on a holographic display. Nadia took a deep breath and started across the vast marble expanse. Her footsteps echoed in the empty space. She had made it perhaps 20 paces when the main doors exploded inward. Nadia stumbled backward as a flood of Draconith warriors poured into the hall. There were at least 30 of them, moving with military precision. Their scales were dark, almost black, and they wore armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. At their center walked a figure that made Nadia's breath catch in her throat. He was enormous, easily twice the size of any Draconith she had ever seen. His scales were the deep purple of twilight, threaded through with veins of gold that pulsed with inner fire. His wings were folded against his back, but she could see they were massive, powerful enough to carry his enormous frame through the air with ease. When he moved, the very air seemed to ripple around him. This was not just a warrior. This was royalty. The hatchling chose that moment to wake. It let out a piercing cry that echoed through the hall like an alarm. Every Draconith head snapped toward Nadia. She froze, her hand instinctively moving to protect the small creature against her chest. The hatchling cried out again, louder this time. The giant Draconith went completely still. His eyes, burning like molten gold, fixed on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then he strode forward, closing the distance between them in 4 massive steps. Nadia found herself staring up at him, unable to move, unable even to breathe. He towered over her like a living mountain. She thought he might simply take the hatchling from her. Or perhaps call for her arrest. She had touched a Draconith, after all, something that was surely forbidden. Instead, the massive warrior did something that shattered every assumption Nadia had about her place in this building, in this world. He dropped to one knee. The motion was so swift, so unexpected, that Nadia actually gasped. The other Draconith immediately followed his example, all of them kneeling, their wings spreading wide in a gesture she did not understand but could feel the significance of. The hall fell silent except for the soft chirping of the hatchling. The giant Draconith extended one clawed hand, moving with exquisite care. His voice, when he spoke, was like distant thunder. "You hold my son," he said in perfect English, each word precise and weighted with emotion. "You have saved the heir to the Draconith throne." Nadia's mind went blank. Heir. Throne. The words did not seem to connect to the small, warm creature pressed against her chest. She looked down at the hatchling, then back up at the kneeling warrior. His eyes held a mixture of relief and something else, something that looked almost like awe. "I didn't know," Nadia stammered. "I just heard him crying. He was stuck in the ventilation system." The warrior's expression shifted, softening in a way she would not have thought possible for someone so fearsome. "What is your name?" "Nadia Winters." "Nadia Winters," he repeated, as if committing it to memory. I am Emperor Dracorian of the Eternal Sky Realm, Supreme Commander of the Draconith Legions, and father to the child you have protected. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that seemed to press down on her like physical force. You have performed the sacred duty of keeper. By the ancient laws of my people, you have bound yourself to our bloodline. You are now recognized as Shield Mother, guardian of the royal heir. Nadia blinked. I'm sorry, Shield Mother. But I'm just a cleaner. I work here. I was just trying to help. A ripple passed through the assembled warriors, and she realized they were making a sound. It took her a moment to identify it as laughter, but not unkind. The Emperor's expression remained serious, though something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. Just trying to help, he echoed. My son has been missing for 8 hours. We have torn this building apart searching for him. Every warrior you see here is a trained tracker, skilled in locating lost hatchlings. We have technology that can detect the heat signature of a Draconith egg through solid stone. And yet, none of us found him. But you, a human with no training and no equipment, succeeded where we failed. How? Nadia thought about it. I heard him, she said simply. He was crying. I couldn't just leave him there. The Emperor studied her for a long moment. You could have. Most beings would have. The ventilation shafts are sealed systems. You risked injury climbing into them. You could have fallen. You could have become trapped yourself. Yet you did not hesitate. He stood, and the other Draconith rose with him. That is the mark of a true guardian. Not power or skill, but the instinct to protect the helpless without thought for your own safety. Another Draconith stepped forward, smaller than the Emperor but still imposing. Her scales were silver touched with rose gold, and her eyes held a warmth that reminded Nadia of her own mother. I am Empress Silvara, she said, her voice melodious. And you have returned my only child to me. Nadia carefully unzipped her jacket, revealing the hatchling. The little creature blinked sleepily, then chirped when it saw the Empress. Silvara reached out, and Nadia gently transferred the hatchling into her arms. The Empress cradled her son, tears streaming down her scaled face. Thank you, she whispered. There are no words in any language that can express what you have given me. I thought I had lost him forever. The royal transport ship cut through the night sky like a silver blade, its hull reflecting the city lights below. Nadia sat in a seat designed for beings 3 times her size, feeling impossibly small and out of place. The hatchling, Prince Aldrich she had learned his name was, slept peacefully in his mother's arms across from her. Emperor Dracorian sat beside his wife, one massive hand resting protectively on his son's back. The cabin was filled with elite guards, but their attention was no longer focused on security. They were watching her. Nadia tried not to fidget under their gazes. Everything had happened so fast. One moment she had been scrubbing floors, and the next she was being escorted onto a royal spacecraft with an armed guard that could level a city block. The Emperor had insisted she accompany them immediately to the Draconith estate on the outskirts of the city. There had been no opportunity to argue or even to process what was happening. You are thinking about your brother, Empress Silvara said suddenly. It was not a question. Nadia looked up, startled. How did you know? You kept glancing at your communication device, the Empress replied with a gentle smile. And you mentioned him to one of the guards. Timothy, yes. A student of engineering. He'll be worried if I don't come home, Nadia admitted. We live together. He's probably already called my comm a dozen times. The Emperor made a gesture, and one of the guards stepped forward with a tablet. Send a message to your brother. Tell him you are safe and that you will explain everything soon. Better yet, invite him to join us. He should be present for what comes next. Nadia hesitated. What comes next? Your formal recognition as Shield Mother, Dracorian said. It is not merely a title, Nadia Winters. It is a sacred bond. Among my people, those who save a royal hatchling are elevated to the highest ranks of society. You will be given estates, wealth, and authority second only to the royal family itself. The words did not seem real. Nadia had spent the last 3 years scraping by, counting every credit, taking extra shifts just to keep her and Timothy fed and housed. The idea that she could suddenly have wealth and estates was absurd. "I don't need any of that," she said quietly. "I'm just glad Prince Aldrich is safe." The Empress leaned forward, her eyes intense. "That is precisely why you deserve it. You ask for nothing, yet you have given us everything. Do you understand what it means for a Draconith to lose a hatchling? We lay eggs perhaps once in a century. Some couples never successfully hatch a child. Aldrich is our miracle, our only offspring. Without him, our line ends. The throne becomes contested. Wars could begin over the succession." "She saved more than my son," Dracorian added. "She potentially saved our entire empire from chaos." Nadia felt dizzy. She had just been trying to help a scared child. The political implications had never crossed her mind. "I didn't know," she managed. "Of course you didn't," Silvara said warmly. "That is what makes your actions so remarkable. You helped because it was the right thing to do, not because you expected reward." The transport began its descent, and through the viewport, Nadia caught her first glimpse of the royal estate. It sprawled across hundreds of acres, a combination of Draconith architecture and carefully maintained wilderness. The main palace rose like a crystal mountain, its towers reaching toward the stars. Landing platforms dotted the grounds, and she could see gardens that glowed with bioluminescent plants. They touched down on a private platform near the palace entrance. As the doors opened, Nadia was hit by the scent of night-blooming flowers and something spicy she could not identify. Servants rushed forward, but the emperor waved them back. He wanted to carry his son inside himself. The palace interior was breathtaking. Soaring ceilings disappeared into shadow above them. The walls were carved with intricate murals depicting Draconith history, battles and ceremonies, the founding of cities and the signing of treaties. Water features created a constant soothing background sound. Everything was scaled for beings of enormous size, making Nadia feel like she had wandered into a realm of giants. They walked through corridors and across bridges suspended over indoor gardens. Nadia tried to memorize the route but quickly became lost in the maze of passages. Finally, they arrived at a grand hall where a feast had been prepared. The table was massive, laden with dishes she could not begin to identify. "Please, sit," Silvara gestured to a section where human-sized furniture had been hastily arranged. "You must be hungry." Nadia realized she was starving. She had not eaten since her morning break at the embassy, and that felt like a lifetime ago. She sat carefully on a chair that was surprisingly comfortable and accepted a plate from a servant who seemed honored to serve her. The meal was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Some dishes were recognizable, fruits and vegetables grown on Earth but prepared in Draconith style. Others were completely alien, strange meats and grain-like substances that tasted of cinnamon and lightning. The Empress explained each dish, sharing stories about their cultural significance. Prince Aldrich woke halfway through the meal and immediately began chirping for attention. Silvara fed him from a special bowl of what looked like liquid crystal. The hatchling ate eagerly, his scales brightening with each swallow. When he was full, he looked around the table and his eyes fixed on Nadia. "He remembers you," Dracorian observed. "Hatchlings imprint on those who save them. In his mind, you are now part of his family." Aldrich squirmed in his mother's arms, clearly wanting to move closer to Nadia. Silvara smiled and stood, carrying her son around the table. "Would you like to hold him?" Nadia nodded, and the Empress gently placed the hatchling in her arms. Aldrich immediately curled up against her chest, making the same contented trilling sound he had made in the ventilation shaft. His scales were warm, and she could feel the strong beat of his heart. "He trusts you completely," Silvara said softly. That trust is sacred to us. It cannot be commanded or bought. It must be earned. As Nadia held the prince, servants began bringing in scrolls and tablets. Dracorian explained that these were the formal documents recognizing her new status. There were property deeds, investment portfolios, and legal declarations that she barely understood. Apparently, she now owned a mansion in the diplomatic quarter, had a seat on the Draconith Advisory Council, and commanded a substantial fortune. This is too much, Nadia protested. I can't accept all of this. You must, Dracorian said firmly. To refuse would be to insult us. These gifts are not optional. They are the minimum required by our laws. A commotion at the entrance interrupted them. Nadia looked up to see Timothy burst into the hall, flanked by two guards who looked apologetic. Her brother's eyes were wide with shock as he took in the scene. Nadia? What's going on? I got your message and these soldiers showed up at our apartment and said I needed to come immediately and, he stopped mid-sentence as he noticed the Emperor and Empress. Oh. Oh wow. Nadia smiled despite the surreal nature of everything. It's okay, Tim. I know this looks insane, but I promise I'll explain everything. Over the next hour, they did exactly that. Timothy listened with increasing amazement as the story unfolded. He kept looking at his sister as if seeing her for the first time. When they finished, he was silent for a long moment. So you're basically royalty now, he finally said. No, Nadia corrected. I'm shield mother to the prince. It's different. It is higher than royalty in some ways, Silvara explained. Shield mothers are answerable only to the emperor and empress themselves. They have the authority to speak on behalf of the royal family and to make decisions regarding the prince's welfare. Nadia is now one of the most powerful humans in the galaxy. Timothy let out a slightly hysterical laugh. My sister. The woman who burns toast. She's one of the most powerful humans in the galaxy. Despite everything, Nadia found herself laughing too. The absurdity of it all finally broke through her shock. Here she was, sitting in a palace, holding a dragon prince, discussing estates and advisory councils. Just this morning, her biggest concern had been whether she could afford new boots before winter, but as she looked down at Aldrich, sleeping peacefully in her arms, she felt something shift inside her. This was real. This small, vulnerable life had been placed in her care, not by accident but by some strange twist of fate. She had been invisible for so long, dismissed and overlooked. Now she was being given a chance to matter, to protect something precious, to make a real difference. 3 months had passed since that night at the embassy. Nadia still had trouble believing her new life was real. The mansion in the diplomatic quarter was more space than she and Timothy could possibly need, with 20 rooms, a garden that would have qualified as a park in most cities, and a staff of both human and Draconith servants who insisted on calling her Lady Shield Mother. Timothy had transferred to the Imperial University, one of the most prestigious institutions in the galaxy. He walked around in a constant state of amazement, sending Nadia messages about the alien technologies he was learning to work with. She visited him often, marveling at how happy he looked. For the first time since their parents died, her brother was thriving. But the greatest change was in her relationship with Prince Aldrich. The hatchling had grown rapidly in 3 months, now the size of a large dog. His scales had deepened to a rich purple-black with threads of silver, a combination of his parents' colors. He followed Nadia everywhere when she visited the palace, which was nearly every day. The Emperor and Empress insisted she spend time with their son, helping to guide his development. Nadia discovered she had a natural talent for understanding Aldrich's needs. She could tell when he was tired or hungry or just wanted to play. She read to him from both human and Draconith texts, teaching him languages and stories. He was remarkably intelligent, already forming simple sentences in both species' languages. Today, she sat in the royal garden with Aldrich sprawled across her lap. He was too big for this now, really, but he still tried to curl up against her as he had when she first found him. His wing draped over her shoulder like a heavy blanket. "Tell story," Aldrich chirped, his voice high and sweet. "Tell about the stars." Nadia smiled and began recounting a human myth about the constellations. Aldrich listened with rapt attention, his eyes wide. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Nadia Shield mother," he said carefully. "Yes, little one. You stay always? Not leave like other teachers?" Her heart clenched. Several tutors had been assigned to the prince, but he had bonded most strongly with her. "I'll stay as long as you need me," she promised. Footsteps approached, and Nadia looked up to see Emperor Dracorian walking toward them. His expression was serious, more so than usual. Aldrich immediately perked up. "Father. Did you see my new flying?" "I did, my son. You are becoming very skilled." But the Emperor's eyes were on Nadia. "Might I speak with you privately?" Nadia gently moved Aldrich from her lap, and the hatchling scampered off to play with some of the garden's crystalline water features. She stood and followed Dracorian to a secluded alcove. "There is a problem," he said without preamble. "The Galactic Assembly is fracturing. 3 member species have withdrawn, citing disputes over trade rights and territorial boundaries. There are rumors of military buildups on several borders." Nadia felt cold dread settle in her stomach. She had been learning about galactic politics as part of her new role, and she understood the implications. War? Possibly. The Assembly has kept peace for over 1,000 years, but that peace was always fragile. Many species harbor old grievances. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The Draconith military is being mobilized. I will need to leave soon to command our fleets." "What about Aldrich?" "That is why I needed to speak with you. During times of war, the royal heir must be protected above all else. Silvara and I have discussed this, and we both agree. We want you to take Aldrich somewhere safe, far from the political centers where fighting might occur." Nadia's mind raced. "You want me to take him? Alone?" "You will have guards, of course. A full security detail. But yes, we trust you to be his primary guardian until the crisis passes." Dracorian's voice softened. "He loves you, Nadia. He feels safe with you in a way he does with no one else except his mother and me. If something were to happen to us in the coming conflict, you would become his regent until he comes of age." The weight of that responsibility was staggering. "Where would we go?" "There is a sanctuary world, kept secret for exactly this purpose. Only the royal family and their chosen guardians know of its location. It is beautiful there, peaceful. Aldrich could grow and learn away from the dangers of war." Over the next week, preparations were made in secret. Nadia said goodbye to Timothy, who was being assigned to a secure research facility where he would continue his studies while contributing to the war effort. They hugged for a long time at the transport station. "Take care of yourself," Timothy said. "And take care of the little prince." "I will." "Stay safe, Tim." "You too, sis. You're basically a superhero now. Don't forget it." The journey to the sanctuary world took 3 days through hyperspace lanes that avoided all major shipping routes. The transport ship was small but well-armed, crewed by elite warriors who had sworn oaths of protection to Aldrich. Nadia spent most of the journey with the young prince, who was excited about the adventure but also confused about why his parents could not come. "They have important work," Nadia explained. "They need to help keep everyone safe. But they love you very much, and they'll come visit as soon as they can." The sanctuary world was called Verdantia, and it lived up to its name. As they descended through the atmosphere, Nadia saw endless forests, crystal-clear rivers, and mountains that touched the clouds. There were no cities, no signs of industrialization. Just pristine wilderness dotted with occasional structures that seemed to grow naturally from the landscape. Their home for the foreseeable future was a compound built into the side of a mountain, overlooking a valley filled with rainbow-colored flowers. The architecture blended Draconith and human elements, with high ceilings and wide spaces for Aldrich to move around as he grew, but also smaller rooms scaled for Nadia's comfort. The days settled into a routine. Mornings were for lessons. Aldrich was learning to read advanced texts now, and his questions were increasingly sophisticated. Afternoons were for flight practice. The prince could glide well but was still mastering powered flight. Evenings were for stories and quiet time, and Aldrich would curl up beside Nadia, his head resting on her shoulder as she read to him. News from the wider galaxy was sporadic and often disturbing. The conflict had escalated. Several border skirmishes had erupted into full battles. The Draconith forces were holding their own, but casualties were mounting. Emperor Dracorian sent regular messages assuring them both that he and Silvara were safe, but Nadia could hear the strain in his voice. Aldrich was growing rapidly now, his body changing as he matured. He was nearly as tall as Nadia when standing upright, his wings broad and powerful. He practiced flying for hours each day, soaring through the valley with increasing skill and grace. But despite his physical growth, he was still young emotionally, still needing comfort and guidance. One evening, 6 months into their stay on Verdantia, Aldrich was unusually quiet. They sat together on the terrace, watching the double sunset paint the sky in shades of violet and gold. "Do you think my parents are okay?" he asked softly. Nadia put her arm around him, or as much of him as she could reach now. "I think they're doing everything they can to end this war quickly so they can come back to you. I miss them." "I know. I miss my brother too. But we're keeping each other safe, right? That's what family does." Aldrich looked at her with those intelligent, ancient eyes. "You are my family, Nadia. You know that, yes? Not just Shield Mother. You are as much my family as mother and father." Tears pricked at Nadia's eyes. "You're my family too, little prince. Always." The war dragged on for another year. Nadia watched Aldrich continue to grow, his personality developing. He was kind but fierce when defending those he cared about. He asked endless questions about everything, his curiosity insatiable. And he was loyal to a fault, constantly worried about the guards who protected them, making sure they were comfortable and well-fed. Then one morning, as Nadia was teaching Aldrich advanced mathematics, alarms began blaring throughout the compound. She jumped to her feet, instinctively moving to put herself between Aldrich and any threat. Guards rushed into the room. "Unknown ships entering the atmosphere," the lead guard reported. "They're not responding to hails." Nadia's training kicked in. Over the past year, she had learned combat protocols and emergency procedures. "Get Aldrich to the emergency bunker. I'll coordinate the defense." "No," Aldrich said firmly. His voice had deepened as he matured, taking on the resonant quality of adult Draconith. "We stay together. Aldrich. I am the heir to the throne," he said, drawing himself up to his full height. "And you are my Shield Mother. We do not hide while others fight. We defend together, or we retreat together." The ships were landing now. Through the windows, Nadia could see 3 vessels setting down in the valley. They were not Draconith designs, and they were not friendly. Hatches opened and figures poured out, humanoid but wrong somehow. They moved in perfect synchronization, their bodies encased in black armor. "Synthetic soldiers," a guard breathed. "The Corinth Collective. They must have discovered this location." The battle was brief and brutal. The guards fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered. Nadia found herself back-to-back with Aldrich, who despite his youth fought with the instincts of his warrior race. His claws and teeth were weapons, and his wing beats could knock enemies aside. But there were too many. Just when Nadia thought they would be overwhelmed, the sky lit up. A massive Draconith warship dropped out of hyperdrive directly above them, so close that its shadow covered the entire valley. Weapons fire lanced down, destroying the Corinth vessels in seconds. Then smaller craft began landing, disgorging Draconith warriors in royal armor. And leading them, moving with deadly grace and fury, was Emperor Dracorian. He tore through the remaining enemies like a force of nature. When the last synthetic soldier fell, he turned to look at his son and shield mother. Aldrich launched himself at his father, wrapping his now considerable wingspan around Dracorian in an embrace. "Father! You came. Did you think I wouldn't? War or no war, when your location was compromised, nothing could have kept me away." The Emperor's eyes found Nadia. "You protected him." "We protected each other," Nadia corrected. Behind Dracorian, Empress Silvara emerged from one of the landing craft. She rushed to embrace her son, tears streaming down her face. The reunion was emotional, and even the hardened warriors were not ashamed to show their feelings. That evening, as they prepared to return to the homeworld, Dracorian pulled Nadia aside once more. "The war is ending. The Corinth Collective overreached with this attack. Other species who had been neutral are now siding with the Assembly. Peace negotiations begin next week." "I'm glad," Nadia said. "For everyone's sake. You have proven yourself beyond any doubt," the Emperor continued. "You stood beside my son in battle. You taught him to be brave and kind. You are everything we hoped you would be and more." He paused. "The title Shield Mother will pass to you officially when Aldrich comes of age. But I think we both know you have been his true guardian since the moment you pulled him from that ventilation shaft." Nadia looked over at Aldrich, who was excitedly telling his mother about everything he had learned on Verdantia. The young prince caught her eye and grinned, waving her over to join them. "I was just a cleaner," Nadia said softly. "Invisible and ignored." "You were never just anything," Dracorian replied. "You were exactly who you needed to be at exactly the right moment. And now you are so much more." As Nadia walked over to join the royal family, she realized he was right. She was no longer invisible. She was seen, valued, and loved. And she had helped raise a prince who would one day rule with wisdom and compassion. Sometimes, she thought, the greatest destinies begin with the simplest acts of kindness. Retry.